that are still being debated on page 5 of the paper. MPs play down envoys' opposition laws to laws. And I was watching part of this yesterday with the Joint Parliamentary Select Committee discussing these proposed amendments. Very interesting session. If you watch that, we'll be waiting and taking a look at what will be happening today. But basically, Jubilee MPs have played down the voice of envoys, in the international community in terms of opposition to these laws. And meanwhile, we're seeing ODM, which is part of NASA, urging lawmakers, urging the public not to give their views on these amendments. But the issue of public participation has always been at question during the making and the debating of our laws. To what extent does public participation go? Because when you go to the street and ask, Wanjiku, whether they've been asked, they've had a chance to weigh in on this, they say no. So what criteria are we using as to who we call these people who are part of the public participation? Yes,
certainly. So the issue of public participation is very fluid still. It got into our laws through Article 10 of our Constitution, which requires public participation in the formulation, making of public policy. Even when you implement, you need to involve the public. It was a matter which was very controversial. It found itself to court. And the working system right now is that there has to be a form and level of public input in all those laws. Right. That is why you see whenever there's a bill which is before Parliament, advertisements will be made, at least in 2 newspapers of wide circulation, and stakeholder forums. People will be called to stakeholder forums so that they give their sentiments. Whether or not those views are taken into account and considered, that's another issue.
Right.
So long as there is ideally a form of public participation, these people came, we had them, they talk. Whether or not those views are taken into account, that's a different thing.
Right, so let's take a look again, once again, at goodwill, because it says right here, we have 22 days to go to the dead date for the repeat presidential election. We've had the meeting between Jubilee, NASA, and IEBC. NASA have agreed to discuss the reducible minimums, but does it signal goodwill on the part of the opposition that they want their conditions to be met and discussed on the table, but the conditions of the other party, Jubilee, they say you guys need to scuttle this bill and get rid of it. They're not willing to take part in this discussion. Does that signal goodwill in terms of fairness for both parties, both parties having their voice being heard?
Yes, certainly. So on part of NASA, it was a scale down, because as of last week when the talks collapsed, it was their condition that we are not going to get into these talks unless this bill is withdrawn from Parliament. But we are seeing that bill has still not been withdrawn. People have discussed it, but still they're on the table. They are discussing. Right. So I think that is goodwill. Right. So I think it's also because on the headline you saw that Jubilee says they are content with the poll. But it's not only about Jubilee. It's about everyone. It's about Kenyans. It's about all political parties. So as much as Jubilee is content about what is going on, that is not enough.
Right.
There has to be a level of satisfaction which is average and takes into account other people as well.
All right. So. Yes.